If someone were to tell me, prior to '04 that we were going to get hit with 4 hurricanes in 6 weeks, I would have thought they were crazy.
We talk about 4 hurricanes, but I just kind of remember this blur.
Recovering from 4 storms at once is something I don't recommend.
Whenever I tell this story to people, I like to bring to mind the movie Groundhog Day, where Bill Murray kept waking up every day, and it was over and over again the same thing.
That was one of those turning points. It's those storms, it's those events that mark a change in how we do business. Even if it has been a number of years since we've had actual experience, we can reflect upon that as we prepare for the next event that we'll have.
On Friday, August 13, 2004, Hurricane Charley was the first of 4 major hurricanes to hit the state over the course of a 6-week period.
This is not going due north anymore. It is moving more towards the west coast of Florida at 20 miles per hour.
One of the things that still I hear is that sharp right turn that Charley took. Well, there was no sharp right turn. We had the forecast headed up towards Tampa Bay, but a lot of people heard me say for years, don't focus on the skinny black line. Less than 10 degrees of a change in the direction of motion was the difference between Tampa Bay and Charlotte Harbor.
The slight shift in the storm's track impacted the evacuations the state and local governments were conducting.
And that was critical because a lot of the evacuation procedures that we would have had in place for that area were not done. And in a very short period of time, of course of 3 hours, we had to come up with a plan to evacuate as many people as we could out of the area.
But then the time to evacuate ran out.
Preparation time is over. You need to just be in a safe location and remain there until you're given the all clear.
Charley left a trail of damage throughout southwest and central Florida, with places like Punta Gorda and Port Charlotte among the communities that were hit the hardest.
It was a horrible mess. We saw very heavy damages, like extensive power outages. Communications were spotty. Some of the cell towers and the radio stations remained on the air until they ran out of fuel.
A number of critical and essential facilities, including fire stations and hospitals, were damaged by the storm. Local doctors and nurses remained at their hospitals during and after landfall to treat their patients and the newly injured, of which there were many.
There were people walking out shell-shocked, people walking around with stuff sticking out of their heads and bodies that they had gotten embedded during the storm, and it was very, very difficult. It was a war zone here.
It was a very intense response for search and rescue, for disaster medical assistance teams that we had asked for from FEMA to come in and staff at the hospitals to get medical care up.
We had been hit very, very hard. Craig was here the next morning, came in the back door of First Light, and he made it abundantly clear from the state director's perspective, okay, we were one team.
We will no longer identify ourselves as FEMA and state assets. We are Charley Command assets. Our only mission in life is to meet the needs of the disaster victims and the communities of this storm.
Afternoon, sir. How you doing? How many people in your family?
Less than 22 hours after the wind stopped blowing, we were distributing stuff in downtown Punta Gorda, and that was all because the state was leaning forward, had those supplies staged in Lakeland, and had it rolling down into our area early on Saturday afternoon.
The response to Hurricane Charley was difficult, but a lot of resources were distributed, and a lot of manpower was deployed to the impacted counties.
We have had 407 trucks carrying 2 million gallons of water into the state of Florida already, and we've had over 300,000 meals delivered so far.
Utility companies also responded quickly, and they had a big job ahead of them.
There are still 1.1 million without electricity. We were successful in the last 24 hours in getting 900,000 back up and running.
As the Charlie response continued, another issue the team faced was having enough fuel for those who needed it.
Charlie came along, and we saw the first strain in resources. So it was really the convenience stores and the gas station type of fuel. But again, it takes electricity to pump gas. So it was a matter of bringing in trucks with fuel that had a pump system connected to it for the first responders.
Even with all the damage, many residents were able to move back into their homes within a few days of the storm, blue tarps and all. But the biggest challenge the Charlie Command Team faced was developing a housing plan for the residents who had been displaced. The decision was made to move more than 2,000 people into trailers on a nearby vacant piece of land right off I-75, and some would live there for over 2 years.
If we had to do it tomorrow, we would do it in a different fashion. We would probably do multiple sites and do a different breakdown as far as demographic is concerned, and not have all ages, all groups mixed together. Because, I mean, that's why you have 55 plus parks and other things. We needed to have more separation for the good of those people.
Hurricane Charlie was a challenging response and an even more challenging recovery. But for the state emergency response team, it laid the groundwork for the rest of the hurricane season that was just getting started.
This was the big, wet storm that wouldn't leave, and that persistent wind-driven rain caused large damages over large areas, not the concentrated damage you saw in Charlie.
And it's another reminder that, hurricanes are not just coastal events. So strong winds and the heavy rains can spread by inland. There were, I think, over 10 inches of rain near Gainesville, Florida. So a hurricane is not a point. It's a large circulation that impacts a large area.
You saw a picture on CNN. They superimposed the storm onto the state of Texas. It's the size of the state of Texas.
It was a very large hurricane, and then it slowed down, and then it stopped.
We were really getting tight on resources, and it was 2/3 of the state, I think by this time, had some type of electricity outages.
Many people had evacuated and ended up in shelters, but the size of the storm and its slow path led to overcrowding. This shelter in West Palm Beach was filled to capacity and was without electricity for over 24 hours.
There were 350 people on this side and 350 people on that side. And they've been in the dark, and they're still in the dark since 9:30 yesterday morning.
Supplies were also running low, even though there were large quantities already in the pipeline.
We have 400 truckloads of water on hand. We've got another 200 on order. We've got over 30,000 rolls of plastic sheeting on hand. We've got 500,000 more ordered. We've got over 40,000 MRAs on hand. We've got over 1 million more ordered.
But because of the constant rain and high winds, getting supplies to the impacted areas, like everything else associated with this storm, was going to take time.
We can't put anybody on the ground past that until the winds get below 45. And that's not going to happen until right there.
Right there.
At that point, we're talking about noon.
Sunday. Noon Sunday.
And that's when we start bringing our people down this way. So you're talking about 24 hours of no movement.
We had to slow the supply chain down until Francis had, made landfall and cleared the area. We kept some essential supplies in South Florida. The other supplies that were coming in, we had to hold them up in North Florida, up at the fairgrounds, into what we call a mobilization area.
Hurricane Francis eventually made landfall, and residents returned home to begin the rebuilding process, which was going to be extensive.
Francis took an enormous time of moving through the state. They gave us many logistical problems, but we were able to overcome those problems.
But even as the CERT was in the midst of responding to Francis, there was yet another hurricane beginning to make its presence felt.
I hate to even ask a question.
That's a $5 fine.
Yeah. Dan, why don't you give them the news?
In the far eastern Atlantic, Tropical Storm Ivan was upgraded to the 5th hurricane of the 2004 season. It's over 2,500 miles away. Our focus right now continues to be Francis.
Good answer, Ben.
Ivan, however, would soon get a lot more attention from the team. The hurricane's track took it through the Caribbean, where it left a trail of death and destruction in its wake.
Good evening. This is the 11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time and 10 p.m. Central Daylight Time update on Hurricane Ivan.
The National Hurricane Center then forecast that Ivan would enter the Gulf on a track to the Alabama-Florida state line, and that the Pensacola area was going to feel the brunt of the storm.
You're definitely on the bad side of the storm, and probably do expect a lot of tidal surge, flooding.
They said you can expect at least a 12-foot storm surge for Perdita Key, Pensacola Beach.
We got about 500,000 people going to get hit with a Category 4 hurricane. Everything that's going to be needed in the next 72 hours needs to be in the pipeline now.
The most vivid memory I have for Ivan is, going down I-10 and seeing, just convoy after convoy going, west on I-10 over towards Pensacola.
And all of that support was going to be needed as Ivan made landfall.
Ivan was probably, of all the storms, the most traditional hurricane, and because of that, it produced some of the worst damages. And that was principally from storm surge.
The level of damage caused by Ivan was catastrophic and widespread. The coastline from Pensacola to Navarre Beach was barely recognizable. Infrastructure was also devastated. The electrical system in the Pensacola area was essentially wiped out.
80 years to build, and it took 8 hours to destroy.
In the whole western part of our system, we didn't have a single light bulb burning. Absolutely no lights, not by a source from Gulf Power Company. I've never seen that before.
But not having electricity was just one of the challenges the state emergency response team had to face. Storm surge severely damaged the 2.5-mile I-10 bridge over Escambia Bay.
We were still under the assumption that we'd be able to drive the supplies in that last mile until we got the first pictures coming in of the I-10 bridge going across Pensacola. And I can remember seeing those pictures up on the big screen at EOC and hearing everybody collectively sucking wind.
That was breathtaking. I mean, awe-inspiring in the sense of the power of nature. Just envision a wall of water coming from the Gulf of Mexico into Pensacola Bay, literally picking up a highway and putting it into the bay. Wow.
Alternate routes had to be devised to get aid and supplies to the survivors. At first, it was through the air with helicopters. And after a few days, enough roadways were cleared to transport the supplies via trucks. Distributing supplies to the survivors fell to volunteers and the Florida National Guard. As they had throughout the entire 2004 hurricane season, the Guard played an important role on the ground in the impacted communities.
There's a confidence, I guess, that the public has that if they see a Humvee or they see a National Guardsman rolling down the street in the neighborhood or walking door to door or handing out commodities or just being around, it provides a sense of calm for the community and for the people.
And a lot of the initial law enforcement was local and state law enforcement. A lot of the initial search and rescue was fire departments and other search and rescue teams. But the Florida National Guard was that force multiplier. They gave us the ability to establish a presence and maintain it, oftentimes freeing up local responders to go take care of their families.
Throughout the first two hurricanes of the 2004 season, a lot of manpower and resources were devoted to the communities impacted by Charley and Francis. The response to Ivan, however, added to the complexity the state emergency response team was dealing with.
It was like playing a four-dimensional chess game. You had four different layers you're dealing. At one time you're dealing with trying to recover from 2 storms, respond to the 3rd storm, and prepare for the 4th storm. So it's a very difficult situation.
And it was not going to get any easier as Hurricane Jeanne approached the state.
We were up against school being back in session, an election coming up that we couldn't postpone because it was a federal election, and this whole transition of trying to get recovery started.
At one point, the forecast track showed that Jeanne might head toward the North Atlantic, but that was a short-lived sigh of relief.
And I can remember when the first updated forecast came back and showed the track now coming back at Florida. We were just like in total disbelief.
Earlier today, I signed an executive order declaring that there be a state of emergency in the state of Florida one more time, and that evacuations may be necessary in multiple counties. This is the 4th such order since that I have issued since mid-August, and a precedent that I'm not particularly thrilled to have set.
By this time, the Capitol Press Corps, I'm not sure if they were just running out of questions or just as much disbelief as us, and they kept asking, how can you guys do this again? And we're kind of looking around like going, there's an option?
Hurricane Jeanne made landfall in the same area as Francis. It added on to the damage that had already been caused. Jeanne continued on its track across the state, and some areas, like Lake Wales in Central Florida, were hit for the 3rd time with tropical storm force winds. Yet the team, fatigued as they were, continued to come up with solutions for the challenges they faced.
A lot of things that were done in the EOC were done because people had imaginations and they had answers. It didn't matter what rank you were or if you were the newest employee on the block.
They're even calling for 3 to 6 inches of rain in Tampa.
I think of our state meteorologist, Ben Nelson. He was only in the job for a month when these hurricanes hit, yet he was able to take the complexity of all of the forecast products and brief the state emergency response team on what the impacts were going to be so we can make timing decisions over how we were going to move resources.
I think I ended up working, I counted 55 straight days. But thank goodness I was young and was up for the task. I was running on adrenaline a lot. So yeah, I was weather boy to Governor Bush, and I just remember him having so much confidence in me and really bringing me into his briefings, giving me a level of comfort. And that was just a real big confidence booster for me, and made me just want to do my job even better.
So you saw that time and time again, people just stepping up and really growing, but also demonstrating what they were capable of. And the team was good because we had the resilience that no one was out there by themselves. There wasn't that single point of failure. There wasn't that command function. If one person drops the ball, things weren't going to work.
We had people that would just come up at the spur of the moment with, why don't you do this, or why don't you try this, or I know something about this community, or I know. It was pretty amazing the amount of people in the EOC and the types of problems we were able to solve because of the simple, common answer that came from somebody. We've stressed that ever since.
After Hurricane Jeanne, the state EOC began returning to normal operations, but the team remained focused on the even bigger job of recovery. It was also the time to begin examining and improving the processes and systems that were utilized during the response to the 4 storms. GPS technology was in its infancy, and tracking of trucks with supplies and equipment was one of the areas that needed to be addressed.
I almost had a heart attack yelling and screaming at federal officials, not to be named, about where the hell the Army Corps of Engineers generators were.
In 2007, the State Logistics Resource Center was opened in Orlando to better manage, track, and distribute supplies and equipment. It's a big warehouse, but it's a lot more than that.
It's actually a logistics management center, much like you'd have a major freight company or UPS or FedEx operation. So we do real-time or near real-time tracking. We put satellite transponders on every truck, on every piece of equipment, because we found in the previous storm people were moving generators and pumps. We didn't know where they were.
Working more closely with the business community was another of the important lessons learned during both the 2004 and 2005 hurricane seasons.
The recovery of a community is directly tied to how quickly the business community can come back and how quickly the tax base comes back and how quickly you can get folks back to work. And by reaching out better to our private sector partners, we can enable that.
I obsessed about points of distribution, but in reality, Walmart got water to Walmart stores as fast or faster than we did.
And so as we started sitting down with our big retailers, because if they can get stores open, then I don't need to send supplies there. Where I need to send supplies where they're not going to be able to get open or where they don't exist, which tended to be either the hardest hit areas or some of the rural or more lower income areas that didn't have some of these resources.
There are a lot of people in this state that are one paycheck away from really bad news, and recovering as quickly as possible from these storms was hugely important. So without the business partnership, it wouldn't have happened.
Another area that needed attention was improving communication systems. The Florida National Guard, for example, addressed communication issues they had in the field when they were in the impacted areas.
We just built a whole new communication suite that's towable, that you can fly an airplane, that you can drive. It takes a couple minutes to set up. We have complete communications. This provides cell, internet, satellite, whatever you need.
Improving communication among the team was one side of the issue. Communicating with the public was another. During 2004, the communication between the CERT and the citizens of Florida was primarily one way, through television and radio. Today, social media has enhanced and expanded that capability.
And we look at this as coming back to treating the public as part of the team and as a resource, not a liability. So we look at social media as one of the venues that we can have two-way conversations.
The ability to better plan is another result of the 2004 storms.
Planning is much more precise because now we have seen some things that were weaknesses, things that needed to be corrected, how we plan for shelters, how we locate them, how we locate those shelters. The state has done more with how they place EOCs, where they place them, how hardened they are. Those are all important aspects as well. Those have all happened since that time.
For a 6-week period, from the middle of August to late September, the State Emergency Response Team, both in the field and at the state EOC, worked nonstop to respond to the 4 hurricanes that hit the state. Every part of Florida was impacted in some way by Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and Jean. 8.5 million people lost power. Over 9.5 million people were evacuated. 368,000 people were sheltered in public facilities. But the most sobering statistic of all was the 117 confirmed fatalities the 4 storms caused. Mother Nature can be a formidable opponent, and she certainly was in 2004. But throughout each storm, the State Emergency Response Team was there to help the people of Florida get through a very difficult time. The 2004 hurricane season was unlike any other period in Florida's history, and it left its mark on the CERT members who were a part of it.
I'm proud of the team, and the team is everyone, all the state agencies, all the local governments. I think the state of Florida showed the world how to handle a catastrophic event.
One of our secretaries of DOT says when you walk through the door, you check your logos and your ego at the door because you're the State Emergency Response Team. And I think that was something that was so powerful of all the state agencies working collectively and not necessarily going, well, that's not my job, or I haven't done that before. It's like, this is what needs to be done. We're going to get things done. But we did it as a team.
Well, it was one of the most meaningful times of my life. I didn't run for governor to preside over 4 hurricanes and 2 tropical storms in a very short period of time, but it gave me a chance to work with incredibly talented, dedicated, passionate people, and be able to be all in to help people when they really needed it was something I'll always remember. I mean, it was a phenomenal time on one level in that regard, and it was also a really sad time because people's lives were just turned upside down.
We will one day again see major hurricanes hit the state of Florida. We will one day again see multiple hurricanes hit the state within a short time frame, and we've got to remain ever vigilant for that day and prepared for it and not let our guard down and use those lessons to prepare for those future hurricane seasons.